Hey, cutie pie.
Hey,
Hey, sweet honey boo boo.
don't butter me up.
I love you.
Sure, I love you too.
And welcome everybody to episode 16 of Simon and AKDI movie reviews or Cinema Crossroads. If you're listening to this on Spotify, if you're watching this on Simon Hill Keeps It Trill, thank you for liking, subscribing, commenting on this video because I know you will. And this is a movie review for I Stand Alone, Gasper Noah's first or second film. I'm not exactly sure. From 1998, it's a French movie. Somebody recommended this movie to me in the comment section for Irreversible, a movie from 2003, if I remember right. That was very, very graphic and very, very powerful. We had a very good discussion on that. I believe that was episode 14 or 15. And now we are here talking about I Stand Alone. Somebody said that I Stand Alone and Irreversible are all a part of some trilogy. I think Climax is in that trilogy too, if not in Enter the Void. But either way, we just finished watching the movie about an hour and a half ago, and I can say it was a ride. What did you think of the movie, acting?
Yeah, it was definitely it was a think piece, and it was interesting. Like other Gaspar Noé's films, it's like it played with different themes, and at times it was kind of depressing. But I'm impressed.
Okay. So I could say that I was impressed too. I love it and hate it. And so the score will be after we walk through the entire plot and break down a lot of things. So let's get into the storyline. So the movie opens with some guy at a bar, a really packed bar. It looks like two French guys or three French guys are sitting at the table, and one guy is philosophizing about power and where power comes from. And he says power only serves the rich and that sort of stuff. Gaspar Noé also has things that flash on the screen, like title cards that indicate chapters of his movies. But I forgot exactly the title that was at the beginning of this. Do you remember?
One of them was morality, but I don't remember the other one.
Okay, so I think that is a theme of the movie, morality, because this movie has some big moral questions. But yeah, this guy is basically talking about power, where it comes from. He says it comes from rich people, but then he pulls out his piece, which is a weapon, a pistol, and says, "This is where my power comes from, and this is how I gain power, and this is how I lay down the law." And so then the movie then goes into a really long backstory, like flashback, not really flashback, but telling the story of this Frenchman who was born, during World War II when France was occupied by the Nazis. His father was taken by the Nazis and put into a concentration camp because he was a communist. He grows up in France. His mother is distant. I believe his mother abandons him, and he grows up an orphan. He ends up meeting some woman, laying down with her, getting her pregnant. But then, she runs away with another man, and basically he's left to raise a daughter by himself. He trains himself to be a butcher because he has no other skills in life. So he works very, very hard as a butcher to save up money and open a shop. His daughter doesn't talk at all. She's mentally disturbed for some reason. And yeah, his daughter one time tries to come and meet him at the shop, but because she's going through puberty, she's now attractive to men. Somebody tries to approach her and take it from her. Dad gets really mad. Butcher man tries to chase down the man. He ends up stabbing the man and ends up doing time in prison. And it's a long backstory. This is only the first like 5 minutes of the movie.
Yeah,
He ends up doing time in prison after stabbing the man in the face. I think he does like 7 years. His daughter is sent away to like a mental asylum because she doesn't talk to anybody at all. And when the man comes out of prison, he ends up meeting some big fat French woman who promises him that he will have the opportunity to open a new shop if she, and if she and him actually become a couple. So they end up moving to the north of France, way outside Paris, and that's where the movie really starts. She's pregnant. He's not working. He's trying to get a job. She had promised him that they would get a shop, but they didn't get a shop. She basically wasn't going to do it for the price that it was needed to open a shop. She wanted to nickel and dime the situation. So that's a very long intro. But what did you think? What did you think of everything that happened in those first like 10 minutes of the movie?
I actually really enjoyed like the backstory, and from what I read, I learned that I mean this is Noé's first long movie, and then before this he showed like a movie, 40 minutes short film called Carn, I don't know, and apparently like that summary that they give us in the first in this movie is like the summary of that short film. So it's like a trilogy, like that one, and I Stand Alone, and then Irreversible, basically.
All right, number one is trilogy,
Sorry.
but triology is funny. It sounds like the study of trees, the study of three trees, triology.
Okay.
And carne means meat, so I guess that would make sense because a butcher deals with
Yeah,
meat. So
but
I
yeah.
thought Yeah, I thought the way of painting France's history, also tying with his own, because throughout the movie he's disparaging towards France. He says France sucks. They're a bunch of wine drinking, cheese eating Nazi lovers. Because France was sympathetic towards the Nazis, like the Vichy government that the Nazis installed, basically was deporting Jews, becoming very repressive to the people. France had a brief fascist government, and that's the world he grew up in, and that's sort of like how he saw France. And I also found it interesting how that reflected on how he saw life in general. He saw very pessimistic, very unfair. Life is just basically just a system of people dominating over people, and there's no remorse, no recourse. There's no saving you. That's how I sort of looked into that backstory of how he talked so much about how his father was taken because of his views, and everything that happened in France and how it related to his life.
Yeah, I do think like seeing after seeing the whole movie, I do also think he had daddy issues a little bit. Maybe I don't know if you agree with that, but yeah, like I agree. I don't know what to say.
Right. So basically, the guy ends up getting a job at I can say, like old person's home, retirement home, after every butcher in town does not want to hire him, or there are no butchery jobs open. And of course, he doesn't. he doesn't want to smile. Yeah, he tries to get a job at some butcher, and the butcher's like, "You got to smile," and the man just does not want to smile because he's seen too much in life. And at least that's how I interpret it. Why don't you think he wanted to smile for the job?
Yeah, I think also like what you said, he saw a lot in life and he wasn't really like happy with his life. Also, like he didn't accomplish anything really. He didn't seem happy, but also it was a little bit also like, you know how in the older times it was like kind of like that. Like you didn't need all this entertainment to do your job a little bit. You know what I mean? Like you don't need to smile or you don't need to like dress in a particular way to appeal to the customer, and you just like needed to do your job good, and then you will be a good employee. So I felt like he was kind of like that old headed guy, if that makes sense.
I mean, yeah, that makes sense because I think we all have this idea that in France, the customer service is really bad. They don't smile. You know, they say you sit down at a French cafe and the waiter is annoyed to take your order. And that's how you know you got good French customer service. But yeah, he's now in this modern day age where this younger manager is saying, you got to smile, you got to make the customers feel good. And he's just not with it. So he ends up getting a job at like this nursing home where he's like a late night security guard. And during one night, one of the nurses comes up to him and screams, "Is there a doctor?" And he says no. And she's like, "You got to help me. You know, this woman is dying." And so he goes in there with the nurse as she injects her with something. And eventually the woman passes away. And the entire time in the movie, the guy is giving like dialogue, like how he feels about his life. You know, the entire time when he's walking to work, going places, he's like, "This is unfair. This sucks. Northern France sucks. I hate my girlfriend. I hate her mother. I hate this whole world." And when the scene comes and the woman dies in the nursing home, he says, "You know, people think that death is something special and grand, but it's very easy and simple. And really, it's like just a part of life. And when we die, you know, there's no big celebration. It's just, you know, people will just come and go. And even though it's something simple, this was the first time that I saw it, and it was the first time that the nurse saw it too. And then she and him sort of get close. Like she sort of puts her head on his chest, and he embraces her in the hallway of the nursing home. What do you think of that scene?
I mean, like his whole inner dialogue kind of felt like, you know, I was in between because yeah, like, do I think sometimes life is meaningless, everything is meaningless, and everyone is selfish and all of that, like all of those things? Yeah, I do think of those things, but at the same time, I feel like the only people who actually like think like that, like their whole life, are people who really don't have anything in their life to value. Because even though that might be true, those things that he's thinking about, they might be true, but it's not like just fun living that way and thinking that way. So why would I go through life just thinking like that, pessimistic and I guess in a way a little bit realistic for his life and things like that? So I was thinking that, like, you know, I was giving some truth to his thoughts, but at the same time I was like, oh, this is miserable. um
Well, at that point in the story, I wasn't just writing him off as just some pessimistic person who's naturally like that. I was thinking that, all right, he's going through a rough patch, but there were times where he was happier. I mean, when he was telling the story about how he got his butchery shop and, you know, he sort of got stable in his life after working so hard, he did it. You would imagine his mind state would be different, but now his fortunes have reversed and now he's negative. So at that point in the movie, I didn't write him off, but I just thought that that inner monologue was not something new. It's not something that I've never heard before, or at the very least, something I never thought. But I just thought it was based on the situation he was in at the time.
okay, yeah, I mean, yeah, that might be true, but I did feel like he was kind of in that situation for a long time. And maybe it like started he started feeling like that or thinking like that, you know, after all of the stuff with his daughter happened and he went to jail and stuff. So yeah,
Mhm.
but yeah, and I guess like in that scene where with the nurse and him like just hugging it out, it was, yeah, it was okay. Like I wish maybe they added like a dialogue here or there a little bit more, but yeah, it didn't feel like sexual or anything like that. Like it didn't feel like she was trying to flirt with him. And yeah, and I also thought that maybe her, like she reminded him of his daughter. I don't know if he said anything about that, but
Yeah, I definitely think that there was some like wanting to bond with somebody, and he was missing his daughter, so maybe that's why he embraced her like that. But he does go through all the thoughts in his head, and you say you don't like the constant monologue throughout the movie, but I like that a bit because I just like to see words and hear thoughts, and it doesn't actually have to be a conversation. It can just be new information. And on one hand, I liked that we got into the mind of the main character, but on the other hand, the stuff he was saying sounded so angsty teenager. It sounded like emo phase 17-year-old in ninth grade. Like some of the stuff, like life is meaningless, bro. Oh man, how come every time I get a girl, I always mess it up? Like what type of 50-year-old man thinks like that? But maybe people do. I don't know. I mean, in your head, we have millions of thoughts that go every single second. So, yeah,
uh,
I just felt like this was like very amateurish for Gasper Noah, but it makes sense because it was his first film. So,
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I guess maybe like it kind of felt like he was like the only time he was sort of at peace or sort of happy was like that scene in the movie so far, like from the beginning, because he just seemed like miserable because of his conditions up until that point. And I felt like he felt a little bit of joy like when that happened because someone was connecting with him.
mhm. Right. So moving on from that scene, he walks the girl home, and she's very sad after that night shift. And as he's walking her home, one of his girlfriends or wife's friends, I forgot exactly if they were married or not, but she saw them walking, and so of course she's going to tell because we have to have drama in this small French town. But he walks the girl home and just shakes her hand, like very formal, like they just finished doing taxes together or something like that. And as he's walking home, he has all these thoughts in his head, like I would be a fool not to get pussy like that, or how come every time I get a girl who likes me, I end up messing it up? And I think this was one of the first moral questions in the movie. There are many moral questions in the movie, I guess, but the first one is getting sympathy pussy morally right? Is that abuse? If somebody if somebody's sad and you're able to get them to lay down with you, is that abuse? What do you think?
I mean, I don't know. First of all, we don't even know if she was attracted to him because let's be honest, he's like an old man, 50-year-old old man who is not that attractive. So I don't even think like something like that really crossed her mind. And then also automatically he thinks, I bet like she wanted to have some of this. And that was like, that was like a moment, at least for me as a woman, was very kind of irritating because I feel like men kind of think that all the time when you show a little bit of like, I don't know, kindness or something. Not all men, but most men, maybe. I don't know. So, and about sympathy sex, I mean, if it's how do you say it? If it's consensual, then yeah, like why not? Why would it be an abuse?
Well, because you're taking advantage of somebody who at the time might be emotionally charged, or they might feel like they need attention or affection. And so if you just slide in there at the right moment, you can slide in there at the right
Wow. I
moment.
mean, maybe that person needs the sympathy dick because let's be honest, when we have sex, it's not always like, it's not always like abusive for us. So maybe that person needs dick. But yeah, I mean, I guess don't lie to them and tell them that you love them or you're going to be with them forever and things like that. But, just have your day and be
Mhm.
honest
So,
about it.
so you're saying you said he was a 50-year-old man who was unattractive. Are you saying you're not going to be attracted to me when I'm 50?
No, because I know you're going to be sexy at all ages, but, he's not.
Right. In my opinion, if you get some sympathy, poon poon, I think you should pray afterwards.
Wow.
you should pray just to forgive that
You
sin.
don't need to pray if if you're honest with the person that you're doing it with. And
Right.
also, I'll
Right.
still be attracted to you when you're 50 because I'll be 50 too. I won't be 50, but I'll be old too. So,
Right.
he was
Okay.
like
So
20 years old and he was 50 years old.
all right. So attraction is reciprocal. That's the moral of that conversation. Let's move on. So he comes back home after having a
We
few
skipped a
drinks.
scene.
What scene?
After he drops her off, he goes to the cinema, if you
Mm-hmm.
remember that part. And he
Mm-hmm.
goes to see like this porno film. And yeah, and while he's watching it, like the camera is showing it to us, it's like just very, in your face. And he's also thinking about like women and men, and he's saying like, we're just men are just sticks, and women are just like holes, and we're only important if we like, I guess if we just like have sex with one person or something like that. And he's like contemplating about, um, relationships between men and women and how they're kind of meaningless and stuff like that. What did you think about that scene?
Right. Well, he said a lot more than
Yeah.
that, but I do think that inner conversation he was having with himself was very important because I think that's the underlying viewpoint that he had for the rest of the movie. He viewed himself as only useful to somebody else because the rest of the movie he's trying to get a job, trying to get back on his feet, trying to reconnect with people from his past. But because he has nothing, because he can't plug anything, nobody wants anything to do with him. He also said in that monologue that life is very short and brief, and parents are only appreciated by their children when they have something to give. If mommy got milk, we drinking from the titty. But if, as soon as them titties are dried up, we don't want it no more. We only like daddy when he got money to give. Daddy ain't got no money, then kick him to the curb. So he was saying that porn stars are the people who truly get the meaning of life. It's not about anything familial. Familial love, as he says in the movie, is not real. There's no such thing as unconditional love, even from family, which I thought was interesting. But I thought the part where he said that porn stars get the real thing about life, that's something a little bit that I believe, because I do believe that when you have sex, you are being as true and honest to yourself as possible, and showing and depicting sex and playing with those ideas. I think those are actually some of the truest expressions of humanity. Because in pornography, we have all the isms out there in front of us, and you can't hide behind it because it's just what you're attracted to at your basis, rawest natural instinct. So I kind of agreed with that part that he said. And about the familial bonds, it really made me think. It really made me think. I don't have a definitive answer for that yet. But what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that like human motives or actions are mostly selfish. I do kind of agree with that, but most of the time it's not conscious. And I think this is kind of what makes this movie a little bit like, a special because it kind of like his inner dialogue kind of tells us things that we don't want to hear, but we kind of contemplate about. It kind of like gives us, this like pessimistic, realist view of life where we might question our ideas and, the people in our lives that we love. Do we really love our parents because we just love them, or do we do stuff because we just love them and things like that? I do think it makes you question as you watch those scenes. And I also thought like I mean, I don't have a definite answer about it either, but just being like 100% honest, I do agree with the fact that everything like a human does is like selfish and from self advantage, but not consciously all the time and not in a malicious way. But that's because just it's kind of like in our nature a little bit. It's like a survival instinct a little bit. Um,
When I saw that scene, I did feel a little bit guilty. Like, I need to call my mom. I don't want to be like this guy. Let me not just call my mom once a week,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. And also like it was an interesting choice to show like literally out and explicit porn while he's contemplating about family, kids, relationships. I thought that was like an interesting choice to like put there because we could have seen him walking in the streets or doing his shift or whatever and he could have been talking about those. But no, we saw porn as we listened to him philosophizing about, these themes.
Yeah, and that French man was wearing a prosthetic.
I don't know.
It was absolutely so fake. I could tell. Like, I could see the color difference in the shaft.
Oh, okay, well, I don't know porn that well, or I don't know penises that well, I guess, but it was just an interesting choice. It sort of says a little bit like it gave a little bit of this is all like random and meaningless, like life or philosophy or anything we think or contemplate about is a bit ridiculous because no matter what happens, we kind of just like go along with life and do, what we have to do. And it was kind of like that for me a little bit
Mm.
because it's like
And,
I'm hearing all
and
these philosophical ideas and I'm looking at a vagina and a dick. So it was like a bit ridiculous.
right. Well, meaning can be found in everything, and why not show it explicitly if he's playing with this idea that men are cocks and women are vaginas, and our only purpose in this life is actually to reproduce. But the conundrum, the paradox of it is that we are meant to reproduce and create something that doesn't even love us in return
Hmm.
fully, and we're supposed to dedicate our lives to something that, well, at the end, it won't even really matter because it's about what you do with your life that will dictate how other people treat you. If your parents are broken, old, and poor, they'll put you in the retirement home and forget about you, which also made me think, well, time to get back to work because I don't want to die in a retirement home pooping in my Pampers.
Wow.
That's not how I want to go out. But yeah, anything else you want to say about the
No,
scene? Moving on, he goes back home after drinking and going to the porn cinema because that used to be a thing back
I
in the
know,
day.
right?
And his big fat wife is yelling at him, why are you coming home so late and that sort of stuff? I saw you outside, or my friend told you were outside with some hooker, and he was like, I didn't do anything. And we somewhat believe him, I guess, because we didn't see him do anything other than shake the girl's hand. And she starts attacking him when he says that he's going to leave. He's just going to pack up his stuff and go. He hates this house and all that stuff. And so then he attacks her too while she's pregnant, very pregnant, like about to burst pregnant, and lays her down on the couch and starts wailing on her and wailing on her stomach as well. And her old mother gets up and says, I'm going to go get the gun. He grabs her against the wall and says, where's the gun? She says it's in the cupboard. He grabs the gun out the cupboard while her mother is like trying to comfort her pregnant daughter who got her stomach like smashed in. He's pointing the gun at them, and we don't know if he's going to pull the trigger or not. And I thought that was a very powerful scene, and I didn't know where it was going. I didn't know if we were going to start off with murder, but what did you think of it?
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. Right after he talks about like these bonds between children and parents are not real, and the love is not real. But then we kind of see the mom, at least attempting to kill him or scare him away for her daughter's like sake. But she's kind of like frozen, and she's kind of like a little bit dumbed by the whole event happening. And we see like the pregnant lady crying on her mom's shoulder and things like that. So we do see like that parental affection there after like his whole speech. And then you also like hear him think like he doesn't have any love for his baby. He doesn't want to have this baby. He's like oh, that baby's dead now, and it's lucky to be dead because he doesn't have to like live in this world, or he doesn't have to be like have this mom and things like that. And he's just like going off about how bad this woman is, and he's glad that the baby is dead and things like that. So yeah, that's why I thought it was like a bit interesting, this scene. What did you think?
Right. I think at that point, it was testing those ideas that he had just spoken about, that there's no such thing as good family bonds that are altruistic and that life sort of has no purpose than to reproduce. Because if we think about it, his mother-in-law stood up and said, I'm going to go get the gun very slowly while she's like inching away. So I don't think that she actually intended to shoot him or kill him. I think she was just trying to scare him to get him off of her daughter, right? And I do think that maybe there was some love from the mother-in-law towards the man, because why would you just say, I'm going to go get the gun? Why wouldn't you just do it? Now, some people might say, oh, that's just what she said, and there's nothing more into it. But I do think there was something in there, and I do think when he started punching her belly and talking about killing the kid, right? He was so enraged and also a bit drunk. He was still caught up in his mind with all of those ideas that life is worthless and meaningless, and why would I bring somebody in this world who's just going to abandon me too? So let me just nip this in the bud right now. And when we think about also this man's life, he was living the type of life that every man fears: being unemployed, being living under the thumb of women, having a woman who's unattractive, and even worse than that, having a child come into this world with no way to care for them. He was probably thinking, "Man, my life is really screwed. So let me just blow the whole thing up," which is a constant theme throughout this movie. Like, this is the edge he's always on. This movie is like the French version of Taxi Driver. This is the French version of
Yeah,
Joker.
everybody says it's the French version of Taxi Driver. I didn't see that
Yeah,
movie though.
Me neither. But I know a good white man edgelord movie when I see it. Oh, I'm on the edge, buddy. If you only knew, that's what this whole movie is, and this is sort of the beginning of that arc. And when he was destroying the family, this was the first tragedy that happened. Because if none of this actually mattered, really, then it should have been much easier to leave. It should have been much easier to go. But to lash out was to show that he actually loved and cared, in my opinion. Because you only hurt the people you actually love, honestly. And while he was lashing out and being abusive and stuff like that, I think that if you look into it and think, we only do these sorts of things to family, and if family really didn't matter, you wouldn't have done any of that. You would have just let it go. But obviously, it did matter. And to the audience, when we're watching this happen, you're saying, no, don't do that, because obviously there's some natural law, there's some morality that says we should not punch a pregnant woman. It's not about rich or poor, white or black. It's about that's morally wrong. That's not okay to do. And so I think this movie is, with that scene right there, is trying to tell us that if you think that this world is unfair or not right, then what do you say about things that are objectionably morally wrong, that most people would say is the wrong thing to do? And that's how I read that scene.
Yeah, I mean, he was definitely like just frantic and, like you said, like on the edge of everything. Honestly, like I was like just waiting for him to sort of commit suicide any point in this movie, because he kind of had like, no aspiration. I guess maybe up to the point where he like, goes back to Paris. But yeah, definitely. Like I do agree with you. I don't know if I agree with the saying you only hurt the people you love. Um, I think I don't know. I think he was sort of like looking for that explosive moment to leave, and before that, he didn't really have the courage to go through with his thoughts, because we hear him think about like very insane things, or like just kind of bad things about sexuality or people in general, and but he never acts on it. But I think here in this moment, it was just like the last straw, and that's why he exploded like that. And then he didn't want to like get in trouble, so that's why he chose to leave without doing any damage, without like actually killing them or anything like that. I don't really,
Mm.
I didn't feel like that care from him, like towards his baby mama.
You think so?
Honestly, yeah.
I don't know. When we think about our lives, who have been the people that have hurt us the most?
Yeah, but it's because we've felt hurt because we don't think that those people will do those things to us, not because they intentionally hurt, because they love us. If that makes
Has your mother ever hit you?
No.
She's never. Okay. All right. Well, moving on. Moving on. I'm not going to say anything. Moving on from that, he takes the gun from the woman from the mother of his baby mama, and heads outside and says, "You know what? I'm just going to go rebuild my life in Paris," and leaves his small hometown with nothing but the clothes on his back, really, some money in his pocket, and the gun. And he tries to hitchhike, and he eventually gets picked up by some by one of the village people. One of the village people, after the band dispersed, starts driving trucks in France and starts taking him down to Paris on a long road. And he ends up coming back to Paris. He says Paris is dingy and dirty and grimy, but it's better than the north of France, which I kind of thought was funny. That was kind of a funny line. That's how I feel when I go from Monroe to New Orleans. But he makes it to some hostel that's packed with like immigrants, Arabs and Negroes, and he checks in, and it's like 60 francs a night. He's only got 300 francs to his name, and he's starts looking for jobs and going to different places. And yeah, what did you think of that when he made it back to Paris?
Yeah, I mean, like his whole notion of thinking Paris is just as bleak, but at least it's like a bit better than the countryside. I think like because he's in a bigger city, maybe he can occupy himself with other people around him, since like Paris is more crowded and things like that. Where like in the in the rural areas, he doesn't really have anything to do really, and he's already
Mhm.
depressed, so it's even worse.
Right, right.
I mean, during that time, like he was going to people, like going to other butchers, I guess, asking if he could get a job and stuff like that. It felt a bit sad, like nobody really wants to help him, because it also felt like everybody was jobless, or everybody was struggling, or I don't know if that's just like the same excuse everyone says when they don't want to help someone out. But it the whole like Paris scene kind of felt desperate for money, honestly. But maybe that was just his like people, or like his friends and stuff.
Right, right. This, I believe, is like the second part of the movie, or the beginning of the second part of the movie, where he really starts to descend into madness, and it really also kind of reminds me of the novel *Crime and Punishment* by Dostoevsky. I cannot pronounce Russian names, but you've read that book, right?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Well, in the book, somebody commits a murder and then goes through the psychological trauma of dealing with that. And even though it's never brought up again, well, generally he just says, "Oh, I hope Piggy or whoever his baby mama was doesn't call the police on me and stuff like that." He's I feel like he's a little bit still dealing with that trauma of what he did. He doesn't show remorse and he doesn't talk about it, but I do think that was the beginning of his mind whirling more into madness and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
a little bit. Yeah, there was definitely like that, kind of journey into the madness, along with like him thinking about the police. I think that's why he was worried, because probably he didn't want to go back to jail, at least during that time in the movie, since he already like did time. So I feel like maybe that was like his jail trauma coming up a little bit. I also want to talk a little bit about this time this movie was shot, if you don't mind that. Because I read an interesting review, and some people said like, "Why is this movie taking place in like 1980? Like it could have been present day." But apparently, in the 1980s, there was this guy called Le Pen, Jean-Marie Le Pen, who was a politician, and he was like super right-winged guy, and he was like focusing on immigration, and also like he was sort of, I mean, today he's sort of like seen as a villain because he was downplaying the Holocaust, and there was like a lot of discriminations against Muslims from his side. So I think this was like a time in France also like there was political conflict as well, and there's like a lot of high rate of employment as well during like this time in France in general. And I just thought that was like a some aspect that might be interesting to look into the movie.
Yeah, and that's where I was about to go into. I was going to talk about the racism that happens in the movie, and I do think that because this movie takes place in '80s France, where they had a right-wing government, and there was that atmosphere of anti-immigration sentiment, xenophobia. I do think that the movie does somewhat of a good job of showing how that mind state can exist in people. Because at one of the earliest scenes, when he first makes it to Paris, he sits down at some bar and he's having like coffee in the morning, and then some guy is trying to argue with the bartender about serving him coffee, and the guy does not want to serve him the coffee at all. And then the camera pans up and you see that it's an Arab person debating this with a French bartender. And the bartender's giving every excuse. Oh, there's no coffee. The shipment hasn't come, stuff like that. Meanwhile, other people are drinking coffee. And it's like blatant racism. Apparently, to some people, racism doesn't exist. But, we can read into it that this is, that sort of stuff. And I thought that was interesting that they would include that in the movie. I think it goes to show like the difference between the northern France and like Paris, which is more diverse. And in northern Paris, I mean, in northern France, you just have like economic problems. But in the city, you have those racial tensions and also economic problems on top of that. And that's what I
Yeah,
think. What did you think of that scene?
I agree with you, but also like it was kind of a bit satiric, or I don't know, a bit of a dark humor because our butcher, who was sort of like a assault criminal, I don't know, like he did punch a pregnant lady, and he's also like an ex-convict and things like that. While he's able to drink his espresso in this cafe, the Arab guy, we don't know anything about him. Like he could be working, or he could be, I don't know, whatever. And yeah, he's sitting in the cafe, not being bothered and stuff like that when he did like something really bad. This Arab guy is kicked out. So I thought that also like showed the irony of the whole situation, and just people like acting depending on how you look or where you're from and things.
Right. During that scene is when it made me realize a little bit that okay, this is a white man edgelord movie because we have people dealing with like real problems. We don't do anything and we get discriminated against. Meanwhile, you're hard on your luck. Yeah, you've had some tough things that happened in your life, but the vast majority of us don't end up trying to kill people or try to take vengeance out on the world or say, oh, woe is me. This white man who's the protagonist of this movie has a very ghetto culture. He has a poverty mindset. He is constantly playing the victim, and that is why he ends up in the situation he is in. And meanwhile, if he were just so happened to look outside of himself and see other people around him who are going through his problems and also much worse, he would probably have a different perspective. But this is the thing: when white folks are unable to see the humanity in others and just see racism happen and not say anything about it, and then even worse, act it out later, they're just destroying themselves too. Because if we were able to see the humanity in everybody, we wouldn't have these sorts of situations. Honestly, like what will happen in this movie.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like where I kind of got off of the train of seeing like this person as somebody who's really being victimized by the world, because this movie showed that there are bigger problems happening than just his kind of sad and messed up life, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I do think like also why one of the reasons why he sees himself that way, and also like in general most maybe like white people, just like European white or American white people, is because they have this sense of entitlement in general, and when they feel like they have the less of the world, then they're mad because they're like, I'm white, so why don't I get all the benefits? A little bit like that, because we do hear him. Yeah, he does complain about like France and all of that, but then he also says like, I love my country and stuff like that. So yeah, we can see that he's a bit of a fascist, or like maybe a super nationalistic guy and stuff like that.
Well, he de-evolves into a
Yeah.
fascist. He sort of, retrogrades into this primordial Neanderthal mindset. So this ghetto cultured, simple-minded white man who has a poverty mindset and will never be anything in his life ends up hearing about this job that's open at the supplier of meat, the slaughterhouse that's in the city. And when he owned his butchery shop, when he owned it, he used to buy all the meat from this factory. So he feels weird about going there. Like, I used to pay you, now I have to come back like a pauper with my hat in my hand, asking you for a job. And so he goes down and sits with the boss for an interview, and he says, I went bankrupt and times are hard, and I was hoping I could, get back on my feet. And the man says, okay, I understand. You don't have a criminal record, right? And the man says, oh, well, I did do some time, not a long time. Somebody tried to touch my daughter, and I, took revenge, and that's why I had to sit down. And so the man says, come back next week, or call my secretary in about a month or something like that. And the man stands up and they shake hands, and he is pissed. Oh, he is pissed. What did you think of that scene?
Um, yeah, I kind of saw that, he wasn't really going to get a job, and he was just like, trying for nothing a little bit when he was like going up to all his friends and stuff. I mean, I don't know. It didn't. I didn't feel any particular like hate towards the rich guy who owned the factory, and about like his inner dialogue as he's like walking back from the factory. Yeah, like he's talking about, the rich people are just like the worst. They don't care about anything else, and all the laws are made for the rich, and prison is made for the poor. I mean, that was kind of like a important statement. I do feel like, and I can like understand that statement and somewhat agree to it a little bit. Again, if I'm taking like that sort of pessimistic realist mindset. And yeah, it was interesting, like, seeing him talk about this dynamic of like, the poor and the rich and stuff like that. Uh, yeah, I don't know. Once again, I felt like he was feeling a little entitled because he was like just looking for a job, and I'm like French guy. I'm not, a black person. I'm not an Arab. So how come like an Arab buys my shop and then now is super popular, making a lot of money, but I can't even get a job at a slaughterhouse and stuff like that. So there was like definitely, like you said, he evolved into a fascist. And honestly, I think the only reason he didn't like Nazis were because they killed his father. And I don't know if he really thought about like the whole ideology and stuff about it, because he talks like a fascist while he says like, these Nazi loving Arabs and stuff like that. I don't know. What did you think?
So during that scene, I was thinking, ban the box, ban the box. It should be illegal to discriminate against people if they have a criminal record. As a black person who has a minor criminal record myself, I have to say this is absolutely unfair for people to get, knocked out of candidacy this way. And I could definitely sympathize with him at this moment. And I thought this was the point in the movie where they're going to point out class disparity, wealth disparity, and that sort of stuff. Because the boss doesn't come across like an asshole. He doesn't seem like a bad guy. He seems like he's actually going to try to do something for him. He just said, I'm not the only one who can make this decision. If it was up to me, I would get you hired. But I have like a board who helped make these choices. So maybe the boss was going to like maybe talk to the board, maybe try to do a favor to make sure his homie can get a job. But he just goes off the rails when he walks outside and has all these wild thoughts, calling the man all sorts of not racial slurs, homophobic slurs. Says his daddy was a Bati boy, and he's a Bati boy. And why are all the Bati boys rich? And the Bati boys are only rich because they don't have any hard work that they have to do. He just started going off, and like you said, just like you said, Acti, he became sort of like the, how can I say this, the soundboard for all the fascist talking points. The Arabs are taking my store. I'm losing my job. I can't get a job at a slaughterhouse. And I love France. I just hate what this country has become. France is so weak. We need real Frenchmen like me to stand up and take back this country from the all the undesirables and that sort of stuff. And like you said, Acti, he probably only disliked Nazis because they killed his father, because everything else he said was generally pretty Nazi-ish. But it was very caveman Nazi-ish. It wasn't very intellectual. It was
Yeah.
reactionary. He was reacting to a situation that was bad for him and then going off the rails and building on top of that. And I think that happens in every country. Definitely happens in my country. All the Trump supporters, that's all they say. The Mexicans are taking our jobs. The LGBT whatever community is ruining our schools and poisoning our children and all this sort of stuff. He's just saying the same stuff that they say. So very cool to see, and good to know, because I didn't know what time this movie was. But interesting how in every right wing administration we get right wing movies. Edgelord white movies always
I
pop out during.
Sorry, I
Huh?
just want to be clear that he wasn't the president. I don't know if at that time French was ruled under far right, but he was just like this controversial figure during that time, and he was like starting to affect other people. But I don't know about the government.
Okay.
Just to be
Well,
clear.
right. I mean, I'm aware of Marine Le Pen, and I know that her father was a Holocaust denier, and that also he basically was like the leader of a party that descended from the Vichy of France.
Hmm.
That's as much as I know about him, but I don't remember him being the prime minister or president of the country. But either way, during right wing times, right wing media always comes out. Joker came out right under Trump, and now to find out that this movie came out during that time, it makes sense now. Makes even more sense. But anyway, you want to pick up from here?
Yeah. So after he's like just walking and bickering and sort of making plans in his head about how he hates this guy, he sees a pub or a bar or something, and he says, "Well, I'm gonna drink for this asshole who didn't give me a job." And then he goes in, and he's drinking and drinking and drinking. He drank like a lot, and he only has 11 francs left. Like his all money is 11 francs, and he drinks. I don't know. I don't remember exactly his thoughts during this time. I guess he was still like talking about rich and poor and all of that. And then,
He was thinking about murdering the guy. He said, "This is what
oh,
I'm going to do. I'm going to murder the boss who didn't give me a job."
okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. So he's having like these thoughts, and they get worse as he gets drunker. And then at the end, the guy says it's 12 francs, and then he only has like 11.20 or something, and he says like 11.20 is okay. And then there's a guy sitting next to him. I don't know. I guess he's black or Arab. He looks like Arab, but maybe he's black. I don't know. Anyway, he like kind of, I don't like, he looks at him and smiles or something like that. I thought he was gonna give him like another Frank to, he doesn't like smile in a condescending way, but he just like kind of looks at him like, huh, interesting type of way. I don't know. And yeah, and then our main guy, the butcher, starts going off at him, calling him like racial slurs and all types of stuff. And then the bartender, apparently he's the father of that guy, of the black guy. And the black guy's like very quiet. He's kind of nerdy. He doesn't say anything. And yeah, the bartender says like, "Who are you to talk about my son like that?" And then he pulls up like a rifle and he says like, get out of my bar and stuff like that. And our main character, the butcher, goes out even more furious about the immigrants and about his life. What did you think about that bar scene?
Yeah, number one, the kid was definitely Arab, and it wasn't a rifle; it was a shotgun.
Okay.
And he cocked that thing back, and he was ready to blow. He was ready to blow his head off. And the scene where he actually says "nigger faggot" to the guy, they repeat it twice, and they highlight his lips and go, really in detail. And that's an intense scene.
Yeah.
And I thought, that movie really tested another like moral, right? Like I would argue, and Aki's going to disagree with me on this, but when you have a protagonist in a movie, you may not like that person, but you sympathize with them. Throughout this whole review, she's been saying, "I understand what he says about this," or "I get what he means by this," but she's going to say, "Oh no, I don't sympathize with him." But regardless, you're tested at this point. After everything this man's been through, is it okay to sympathize with his racism, right? And that's what happens when he, calls this young boy a racial slur to his face. Now we see where it comes from: his ignorance, his poverty, his lack of opportunity. But it makes you question, like, should we sympathize with these people? Because we all know racist people. We know they exist at least. But do we sympathize with their plight, or do we condemn them just for being that, right? And I thought that was an interesting question to ask. And I would say to that question, I think that I would say if somebody is racist, they should be condemned for their racism, but we should try to create a world where they don't have to resort to that sort of caveman thinking where, I get mad at the bar and I just start going off on the little immigrant kid or going off on minorities in general. So that's what I thought about that scene.
Yeah, okay. I do I when I said like, yeah, I do understand him for like this idea or that idea. Yeah, I'm kind of talking about like his ideology or his philosophy, and I'm saying like, yeah, I thought about it, or it's just sort of like something that I would think about it if I'm in that mind state where I'm just sort of pessimistic about life. But he is one of the most unlikable characters that you will see in a movie, and the most unlikable protagonist. I hate this word, main character. I'm gonna say because I can't say that word. But yeah, I just I don't know like if any of his actions are redeemable, just because we need to sympathize with him, because I don't think the audience sympathize with him that much, honestly.
I think the audience does sympathize with him because as long as the person is telling the story, they have the camera on them, you're going to sympathize with them. I've been racking my brain trying to come up with as many examples of movies with villains as the hero as possible, but the only one I can generally think of is like Joker, Venom, and the Star Wars franchise. I know you're more familiar with like Harry Potter and like Hunger Games and stuff like that, but if they ever made a movie on the backstory of Voldemort or the House of Slytherin or I don't know, whoever the villain is in Hunger Games, they would be the protagonist and you would sympathize with their story. Just like we began to sympathize with Darth Vader because we saw that he was born a slave and ended up becoming an even bigger slave to the Empire, right? So I
Yeah,
think,
but sorry, go ahead.
go ahead, no.
I just wanted to add that this is a movie that's not glorifying the villainy of the main character. And most like I've seen Joker, and in those films, their villainy is sort of justified. But nothing that this man goes through really justifies his behavior and acts. He can be like homeless or whatever, like or very poor, but we kind of see that he sort of got himself in these positions a little bit. And yeah, overall, I don't think this movie glorifies the villainy of this man. And that's why I think people don't sympathize with him that much as they sympathize with Joker or, any of those type of characters.
I feel like if you're going to say something like, it felt sad, even if you didn't say, I don't know exactly what you said, but I do remember you saying something like, it felt sad when he went to Paris and couldn't find a job and everybody was turning him down. If you say that, that means that you at least could see yourself in his shoes, which shows that there is sympathy and empathy there. Sympathy is not justification. It's not liking the person. It's understanding what they're going through. And as the protagonist of this movie, he's letting you know or telling you how he feels about his situation. We don't justify him thinking about killing his boss, but we sympathize because we know why he feels that way, if that makes sense.
Okay. I mean, yes, I did say that, but it's just like he has a sad life. And that's the way just like I see it. And I put the adjective there because he has a sad life.
Right.
And I don't know.
But the racism scene, I mean, for me, I fell off the train of rooting for the guy then, but I still sympathized with him, because I thought there might be some redemption here. And the movie is very interesting because it plays with the idea of this character finding some redemption when we get closer to the end. But I think we're getting closer there. So after the scene with the Arab kid, he goes back home, gets the gun. He only has 3 bullets. which is an interesting situation. So he's very poor, so every shot matters to him using those bullets, right? So he's thinking about who's going to get them. I'm going to go kill the bar owner who put a gun in my face, the guy who laughed at me when I pulled out my change to pay for my drinks, and the other guy who called me a homophobic slur when I was leaving the bar. And he's then thinking, oh no, I got to save one bullet for my boss too, which goes to show that if we really want to stop gun violence in the world, we just got to make bullets expensive. What do you think?
I agree. Or we just like don't have bullets available to people.
Chris Rock has a famous joke where he says, if every bullet cost $1 million, you would kill somebody and then go collect your receipts. Something like that. Like
Yeah,
you would pull the bullets out of somebody after you shot them.
exactly, exactly. It shouldn't be that cheap to. It should something that threatens the life of humans shouldn't be that cheap. Definitely.
Mm. But luckily, he gets his gun and goes back to the bar, and the bar is closed. He kicks the door, and there's nobody there. And what happens after that?
Yeah. After that, I think he decides to see his daughter. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So his daughter is in this mental institution, and he goes there to pick her up. And he says to the nurse that like I want to take her to the Eiffel Tower just to like have a good time. And then they leave, and obviously they're not talking because the girl is mute and has some disabilities and stuff like that. And they get on the subway, and he's like, I think she's feeling uncomfortable now because she knows that I'm not taking her to the Eiffel Tower. I should like comfort her and things like that. But he doesn't do anything really. He's just like sitting there looking at her and stuff like that. And he's still thinking about like what to do with the bullets. He's like also now contemplating the idea about like just killing himself as well. So he's like, calculating the bullets. He's like, okay, so I'm gonna kill the bartender, and I'm gonna kill my boss, and then I'll kill myself and stuff like that. And yeah, and then they get to the hotel room, which is actually the hotel room where his first wife got pregnant. So this was the hotel room that his daughter was consumed. What's the word?
conceived.
Conceived. Sorry, she was conceived, which is sort of interesting because it's like a full circle. And then after that, it's like kind of weird silence, and we're seeing his inner thoughts. Do you want to take over from here because it's kind of crazy?
So he basically has his daughter in this room. By the way, I think there was a flashcard in front of this scene,
Oh yeah,
and it said something like "Life is death" or "Humans are moral." I forgot. We just watched the movie. If you've seen this movie 3 or 4 times, don't just crucify us because we don't remember Gasper Noah's cards he puts on the screen. But there was the infamous 30-second clip where it says on the screen, "If you don't want to be shocked or appalled, you have 30 seconds to leave the theater." Right?
yeah,
And I thought that was interesting because it did make me stand up in my chair and say, okay, I can't wait for the gore. I can't wait for whatever tragedy is about to happen now. But I kind of feel like it was a letdown because I think we've seen much more gorier things. But maybe in 1998, just the suggestion of what happens next is enough to make people revoltingly sick. So,
yeah.
yeah,
I mean, this is his first movie, so nobody has seen like Irreversible and Climax and all of that. So maybe he was giving the audience some idea about how disgusting some of his scenes can be a little bit.
right,
And
right.
also, it was just like him communicating with the audience just as a director or as a
Right.
storyteller.
Right, which is interesting. Which is interesting because he broke down that third wall. I mean, when you're watching a movie, the wall between the audience and what they're seeing in cinema is sort of like the silent rule that's not to be broken. Actors don't look directly in the camera; they don't talk to the audience, and the directors don't remind people, "Hey, you're watching a movie." You want them to be immersed in the experience.
Yeah.
But putting that trigger warning there, I think that was kind of like maybe revolutionary for the time because I can't think of any other movie that I saw that came before then that said, "Hey, just a reminder, this is a movie, and if you don't want to be sick, leave." I
Yeah.
haven't seen something like that before.
Yeah, and maybe it's a bit of a commentary on, how those people who see like just very bad things happen in cinema, in screen, and then they go off and just like crucify the director. Like, how can he portray this? How can he put this on the screen and things like that? So maybe it was also a bit of a burn. I don't know. So
Right.
he was like, so I'm going to tell you to leave. And if you don't leave, it's not my fault.
Right. I think also it's a double burn because he's saying, what does this say about you that you would choose to sit here and watch what happens next
Yeah.
when you know it's a man and his daughter going into a hotel room?
Yeah, because I doubt like anybody who's seen that like warning and they walked out because you're curious at that point and you want to know how the movie's going to end because this is the ending.
Right. Exactly. And yeah, the movie asks a lot of big moral questions. It challenges the audience, but it also, challenges our ideas on screen. So the man goes into the hotel with his daughter. They sort of like hug and embrace. She's wearing like a big coat and stuff like that. He has the gun with him, and he goes to the hangers to like pull out the gun and say, "Okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to, take her life and take my boss's life and take my own life and stuff like that." Then the next scene is him like putting his hand up her skirt, and then the next scene after that is him without his shirt on and her like getting up off of what I presume to be the bed, right? So they don't actually explicitly show them having coitus, having relations, doing the nasty, getting a bumping grind on. They don't show that. None of that is there. So
But we can guess it happened.
we can guess it happened, right? And then he goes behind her and says, "I have to do this. I'm saving her from pain for all the years of pain and stuff like that." And he,
He's not saying any of this, by the way. He's just thinking in his mind.
he's thinking this in his mind, and he, blows the back of her neck out, and the bullet is like pierced through her throat, and she's like wheezing, and blood is gushing out. And he's like, oh my god, why didn't she die? And there's a lot of inner dialogue that happens. It's sort of like a flood of thoughts go in his mind, like, you're a butcher, you've seen death before, you know what this is like. She should go easily. It shouldn't be like this. It should be like this. You should take your own life. You shouldn't take your own life. You should leave right now. You should stay right now. You should put another bullet in her head. You should go to hell. You should think about what you did. You should try to fix this. Maybe you can save her. Maybe you can't save her. Maybe you just need to kill yourself now. All these thoughts just sort of collide, run on top of each other. Somebody is banging on the door outside, saying, what's happened in there and stuff like that. And oh, by the way, I forgot that we didn't mention this throughout the movie, because this is something also unique in this movie. Every time the camera switches, there's these loud bing, bing,
It's more like a
and
bang.
yeah, more like bangs during random conversations in the movie, right? Which sort of keep you awake, because honestly, this movie is really a slow burn if you take away that sound effect, right?
Yeah.
That sound effect that happens throughout the movie whenever there's like a scene change or camera switch.
Yeah,
But
it's like a sound effect of a horror movie. So
mhm,
every time you see those, you hear that sound, it's sort of reminds you of something like, scary, or something like, I don't know, it builds up tension.
mhm.
And yeah, it kind of hints at the violence maybe a little bit in his head, and then also like the violence we see on the screen as well.
Right. But I brought up that sound effect because at this time, that sound effect is the most prevalent in this movie. Like every 5 seconds, that sound comes with every new thought and with every bang on the door, and like every time he puts a gun to his head or puts it back down and puts it back up and stuff like that. That sound comes, and yeah, he eventually puts one more bullet in her head, and finally she passes away. And now he's really lost. He really doesn't know what to do. He does all the thoughts in his head about that would go into the man's mind who just took his own daughter's life, just flood his mind. He lays down on the bed and eventually talks himself into doing the same thing to him, doing the same thing to himself. But then after he does that, after he says, I need to enter the void, time to enter the void, which I guess we'll talk about next, because I guess this is another movie we have to cover. Uh, the scene goes back to him wearing his jacket, and he never does that to his daughter. He never actually did that. So it was just a dream sequence, which I thought was kind of cheap.
I don't know if that was a dream or if we were presented with two endings, honestly,
Mm,
because there wasn't, a whimsical change or anything like that. It's just like we see him killing himself, and then like it switches to the beginning. So I don't know if that was a vision, if that was a dream. I don't know if that was two separate endings to one movie. And I'll
okay.
say something, different when we hear about the second ending or the real ending,
Okay.
whatever.
I thought it was, I'm going to argue that it was a dream or him playing out what would happen in his own mind. Because I think that's how a lot of people think about the consequences of events. You say, should I do this? Should I smack this mother effer right now? Or should I let him live? And you think, if I smack him right now, what will be the chain of events? And da 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 da. Okay. And now you're back here, right? So that's what I thought was happening in his mind. Or it was just a dream, in my opinion. But
Okay.
either way, his clothes are back on now. He's at the dresser, and he, instead of pulling out the gun, he puts it back up, and he goes and hugs his daughter a lot, and says he loves her and that she is the most precious thing in his life, which I thought was kind of touching and very beautiful, because up to this point, this man had nothing to live for, and he was trying to do everything by himself. But the idea, I think the big theme of this movie is that a man cannot be alone by himself. We all need somebody to love us in this world, and we all need to love somebody in this world. And so that scene where he hugs his daughter, tells her how much he loves her back, and she doesn't say anything, but she, allows him to embrace him and stuff like that. I thought it was very powerful. He kisses her all over her head and her neck and stuff like that, and not a gross way, I would say. Some people
Yeah.
might see that kissing scene as gross. I didn't see it as gross. I just thought it as a big release of emotions. So he's
Yeah.
just like kissing her all over because he hadn't felt affection or touch at all, this entire time.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't see it as a sick way either, because it was like throughout this movie we can hear from his inner dialogue that he's like he loves his daughter, and he's like his daughter is like the one thing that he's actually concerned about in life, and he cares for her, and he also expresses like his want to comfort her and hug her and things like that, but he never does until that moment. And I'm guessing like maybe that was one of the first times that they saw each other after a long time. So it's definitely, it feels like a relief because he's like crying and stuff like that.
Right. I will say this critique, though, of the daughter as a character, having her be mute, in my opinion, is a weak way of telling the story. And, not allowing her to speak or giving her any lines, in my opinion, cheapens the bonds that are between them, or the bonds that have been severed between them, and whatever problems that they have. And not allowing women to speak at all in this movie, I think, does allow space for us to explore the mind of, white people who feel like the world is changing too fast around them, and they're slowly dying off, and they're becoming useless and extinct, and that sort of stuff. I do think the movie gives space for those ideas, and we need a lot of space to cover those ideas. But not allowing a woman to speak in this case, I think, is tragic in telling the story. I do think she should have had some lines or some expression or something like that, because I want to know why she was mute, why she was so distraught. She did live a tragic life. Her father was taken away, never knew her mother.
I mean, we know that like she was also mentally, not stable. But I don't know. Maybe and I'm just like coming up with this right now, but maybe like she kind of represented all things pure and sort of, beautiful and peaceful a little bit in his world. And at that, like, and in his world, actually, there were no good things, and also in the world, there are a lot of like bad things. And maybe like her being silent was kind of hint at that, like, all the good things in this world are like kind of silent, are not that noticeable, and all the bad things, like his inner thoughts and the things that he did, are just like in our faces. And it takes a certain, like, I don't know, it takes a certain effort to reach to that pureness. And I don't know, maybe that was why.
Yeah, I think there's some truth in that. There's a reason why monks take a vow of silence, and they say that if you decided not to speak for a week or for a month, you find out sort of like who you really are, and also you find some inner truth and peace. So I do think there is some truth definitely in what you said, because a lot of his thoughts and words ended up being actions that were very negative, and sometimes even entertaining a certain idea or thinking certain ideas can cause negative consequences. So speaking death into existence brings death. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I believe in the movie theater scene, he said it would have been better if my fat baby mama and her mother just died, right? And then what
Mhm.
happens later? He almost like takes both of their lives, right?
Yeah.
So these ideas definitely can lead to negatives, and so not having her talk can sort of just say this is purity, this is just peace, right? So you
Yeah.
have a point.
Yeah.
So moving on, after he like hugs her and embraces her, the same scene of him having his hand on her knee. I thought this was going to be the difference between the two, because we saw that scene earlier where he puts her hand on her knee, but then he moves up her skirt. In the second scene, he starts by putting his hand on her knee, but then moves down, which I thought was going to show the difference. What is morality? Morality is not putting your hand up your daughter's skirt, right? Morality is. I thought he was trying. I thought the movie was going to say morality is not about what society says. It's not about even what is natural, what people consider morally right. It's about resisting temptation. Morality is about resisting temptation. I thought that's what he was going to say, but the hand moves up the skirt, and he then starts fondling his little girl, and then the movie ends with him on the balcony. No, the movie ends with him like rubbing his daughter's breasticles on the balcony, kissing her and stuff like that. The camera fades away from them. We don't actually see them do the bump and grind, do the two-backed beast. We just see an alleyway of France in the street while kids are playing, and he's talking, saying, what do society know about freedom? Freedom, they think that they are free, but they're actually controlled, dictated by laws. Nobody will get hurt by us being together. We have everything to gain and nothing to lose by being together, me and my daughter. So let's just do this. And I thought that, last dialogue was him sort of rationalizing his morality, rationalizing his decisions, because by all accounts, sleeping with your own daughter is morally wrong, objectionably wrong, naturally wrong. But this is what I think maybe the movie was trying to say. Instead of morality being what we resist, morality is whatever we rationalize. Whatever we rationalize, whatever we can think through, we can make it moral to ourselves, at least. And that's the ending of it. That's what I thought. What did you think of the end?
Yeah, I think ending was like, okay, so this is what I'm gonna say, because since there are sort of like two endings, even though the first one might be a dream, if we consider it like which outcome is the best one out of the two that we have, so them like just dying, or them being together but having like this twisted romance father daughter thing. So it's like, it sort of made me think like, okay, so we have like two really sort of non-moral endings, right? But one of them does seem a bit more like peaceful, but then what does that say about our morality and our moral, like, principles and things like that? And I do agree, like the movie, I think, constantly like goes through what is moral or what is not, because all of the butcher's thoughts are not moral most of the time. But maybe the story is trying to tell us that you might not think like a moral person, but most of the time maybe probably do act like one, or at least like the times where he was thinking about like bad things or plotting to kill people and stuff like that. Most of them didn't actually happen. Like, yes, he did punch a pregnant lady, but other than that, and he was a racist, but he also thinks much more like worse things. And also, like, can we justify his acts because of how miserable he was or because of the things that he went through? So then, like, it sort of plays with this idea, like, what is morality? Can we justify some acts because of, like, what people went through? um, and also like the ending. One, two of them, both of them, we would consider not moral. But which one would you choose as an audience?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think maybe the two endings do show different sides of morality, or different ways that we can look at what is the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. I just think that the ending really shows that, this idea that we could be alone as people in this world is not true, because, the only way he could keep somebody in his life is if he, unfortunately, I hate to say this, but slept with them, right? Because he didn't have any family to call on. He didn't have anything like that. Eventually, all of our children, sons and daughters, will find partners to be with. They don't want to be married to their moms and dads. So eventually we will be abandoned. And the only way he could find a way to not be abandoned was to make a conjugal romantic relationship with him and his daughter, right? Because they're the only way that he can be in this world, safely, right?
Yeah.
Uh, After watching Irreversible, we do know that eventually that relationship fell off and he went back to jail, right? Because I guess somebody found out about his incestuous relationship. So he ended up getting in trouble for that. But I think if we just keep this movie by itself, we know that, you know, he tried to find some peace in this world through family, right? Even if it's a
Yeah.
sick way. Yeah. What do you think about that idea that he was trying to keep some family or keep, support around him by creating that romantic relationship with his daughter?
Yeah, I mean, it's ironic for him because he was the one who told himself that family doesn't matter. No one is innocent. Everyone is selfish, and everyone is just waiting for that moment to abandon you. You're all alone. You're born alone. You die alone, and all of those things that he said to himself. But like in the end, we see him trying to connect with his daughter in whatever sick, twisted way that he wants to.
Right.
Um, yeah, like I agree. He was longing for that sort of, connection with someone, or he needed it. And the only person who could possibly give him at that moment is his daughter because she's mute and she's like sort of, mentally challenged. And probably he is the only person in her life and she is not very aware of anything happening in around her world. So she's probably like, I love my daughter. I love my father. And maybe she just like goes along with everything that he does.
Mhm. All right, so that's the entire story overall. I got to say that now I officially hate Gasper Noah. I knew something was up with this man the first time I watched Climax because I'm like, okay, why are we telling the story about these individuals who are a bit off of the beaten trail? They live alternative lifestyles. Why are we telling the story where eventually they become ravenous heathens who devour themselves? I was like, okay, this is a bit odd, especially with the ending where the police show up in this upside down world, but they're here to bring order and bring everything back correct. Then it kind of got even worse with Irreversible, right? Where this very toxic, masculine, patriarchal man named Marcus is seeking revenge against this gay rapist who's running around the city, raping people and attacking people, and he almost gets raped himself. And yeah, the enemy of these people are the gays who have taken over Paris and the underworld and all this sort of stuff. And now watching I Stand Alone, a pure, in its essence, a pure edgelord white man film where a white man feels vengeful and hateful and resentful against the world that has now abandoned him and moved on without him. And the entire story is basically his wild thoughts in his mind. And he is constantly being pushed to the edge by people who have greater power and forces than him. I cannot not look at Gaspar Noé films and say that he is trying to send a progressive message. Maybe his intention is to be progressive, but the way that it comes out, if this media is consumed in by itself, years from now, when all of us are gone, even himself are gone, right? These movies could be used as propaganda by people who say, see, look, this is what the degenerates are doing to France. This is what the degenerates do everywhere they move. This is how I look at these movies, because there's never once these people who are considered on the margins, fringe, oppressed, they are never, ever seen in a good light. They're never seen in a good light in his movies. That's how I just feel about him, honestly.
I mean, I don't share the same, hateful or not hateful, but I don't share the same dislike as you towards Gaspar Noé. I don't think like his movies are fascist or, homophobic or transphobic or whatever. Because why, like, he only made 7 movies, and why would he like make his masterpieces about these things that, honestly, for me, shows just like the worst things in our society. I don't feel anytime I watch his movies, I don't feel any sort of hatred towards trans people, like God, I can't. The thing is, I don't feel any like hate towards the oppressed people. And yeah, there might be some characters who are not perfect or who are criminals in his stories. The thing is, like with Climax, we sort of knew, even though a lot of those people did crazy things, it wasn't their fault to begin with. So it kind of creates a little bit of sympathy towards those characters. And in this movie, in I Stand Alone, I think like it's that's the thing. Like he doesn't glorify this white man edge lord thing. Once again, I'm going to say this. It's nothing to sympathize. There isn't any sympathy towards his edge lord feelings.
Yes,
At
there
least
is.
I don't think there is, and I don't
When
think that's what
when
this
you say
movie was
it's so
trying to
sad
do.
he couldn't get a job, it's so sad that he lost his butcher shop, it's so sad that he has no family. You are sympathizing with him. You are not justifying and not liking it, but you say that is bad for him. That is sympathy.
Yes, that is sympathy, but overall, in general, the movie doesn't make him a good person, doesn't make him someone who was right to act the way he did because he went through all of those things. The movie doesn't do that. The movie still portrays him in a bad light. Yes, there are moments where you sympathize with him, but when you look at overall, you don't like his all of those like sympathy that you feel towards him doesn't like make us understand why he did the things he did, if that makes sense.
We don't understand why. Well, we understand why, but what I'm saying is that it might not be glorified. Nobody, I don't think the movie makes it look great, but it also depends on who is watching it. Because you are not a hateful person, actor. You're not going to watch it and say, oh, the rectum is a good representation of gay folks and trans folks. Or Climax, the way the people acted here, is not a good representation of, gay folks or trans folks or people on the margins. But actually, if I were to make a movie about a Turkish man who moves back to Istanbul and he can't get a job, opening another donor stand or kebab place because all the Kurds moved in and they bought his shop and he can't even get a job at the kebab making factory because he has a criminal record. And so then he goes around the city harassing Kurdish people and saying stuff like that and looking at his country change because the Kurds and the Arabs are taking over the nation. Would you say that this movie could not be viewed by some people as, yep, buying into nationalistic propaganda?
But that goes
But
for
but but,
any
but
movie, Simon. If you show any movie to certain people, yeah, they're gonna say the same thing because apparently there's something wrong with the way they think or something wrong with their morality. If you show Amistad to a white supremacist, he's gonna say, yeah, we helped the black people or something like that. So
that was my criticism of Amistad. That is exactly what I said.
yeah,
It
so
can
it
it
doesn't
can be viewed by
necessarily
people.
make Noy a racist or a fascist director. Then
But
Spielberg is also a fascist director.
no, but Spielberg doesn't constantly show those images. So the next movie I'm going to make is about a Turkish man who's going to fight against all the gays who are taking over Istanbul. And there's a gay rapist running around. And there's also a bunch of like prostitutes and hookers and trans people all in the city too. And he's going to harass them, shake them down until he finds the gay rapist.
Yeah, but
Wouldn't you say?
I don't think in his movies those characters are like looked through a lens of, their whole community. I don't think they represent their whole community, and the focus is not that, but focus is mostly on like, some of like the real stuff that they go through or some of the very fucked up shit that all of us go through in the society. And I don't think it's like a, representation of any particular group. I don't think
Listen,
that's the focus.
listen, you keep saying real stuff. You said this here and also like when we have these discussions like outside. But I don't consume that much like gay media or anything like that. And I'm not like here to defend gay people, so like to the tooth and nail or whatever. I don't care. But you keep saying real stuff, and I'm wondering: is the rectum like a real place, or places like that do exist? Are there like gay rapists running around raping men and women? Are there like these crazy drug fueled dance party orgies that happen all the single time? You might say, oh, these are based on real events, like Climax is based on a true story and stuff like that. But come on, like, why do we constantly like have to show these people in this light? And then, because that can make people like you say, oh, no, this reflects real life. I think saying that that's real life is hella dangerous because I don't think places like the rectum do exist in a lot of different places. There are gay bars, gay clubs, but it's not the rectum like in Irreversible, if that makes
Yes,
sense.
but for example, in the movie Irreversible, there was nothing bad in the rectum other than the actual rapist. Like
No,
the movie wasn't about the horrors of the rectum. The movie was about a rape. And in Climax, the movie wasn't about like transgender and gay people just being together and being gay. It was about drugs and what drugs can make you do, basically a little bit. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like the focus wasn't on how like there are bad things happening in the gay world. It wasn't like that. It was mostly outside of the gay world, but those people were just like affected by what was happening.
I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say this. You might say, "Oh, there's nothing bad happening in the rectum," and I would agree. If a bunch of gay guys or a bunch of straight people want to get together and have orgies or fisting parties or just jack off in the corner while other people smash, sure, okay, that's nothing inherently wrong with that. But the difference is perception. The way the rectum was shot and the way that this movie portrays the rest of society around this man in "I Stand Alone," it makes you think that this world is turning upside down. Literally, that's why the camera was twisting and turning, and we heard a bunch of loud music and everything was red. Like you said in a previous review, I think for Irreversible, when everything goes red in a Gasper Noah film, you know something tragic and dangerous is about to happen. And the rectum was all red. It was all red. So you get what I'm saying? Like these movies paint a picture of a society that is supposed to be falling apart and full of degenerates. And that's what I'm thinking is also happening here in "I Stand Alone" too.
Okay, first of all, the reason why camera was spinning and the place was all red and stuff like that might be because there was actually a climax, a brutal scene in that same scene. So it might be because of that, because we had red lights in the rape scene as well. So, and we had camera spinning at every time the time went back in Irreversible. So like it doesn't necessarily mean it was put there to make these people look bad. It was building up to attention, a climax of the movie. And I think in this movie, I Stand Alone, the more that I hear about this white edge lord man's thoughts, the more I feel repulsive about his ideas and his generation's ideas. So how come that gives a message of don't change the world, or these people are like wrecking up our world?
Because he would have not been pushed to that edge if he was able to get a job, if there weren't a bunch of immigrants buying up the businesses and becoming more successful than him, if he didn't have to live in some hotel with a bunch of Negroes and Arabs, all this sort of stuff. If he didn't have to live in this sort of world, we wouldn't have those consequences. Even if you look at his consequences as bad, or you can't justify, his decisions, you would say, from a societal standpoint, he was put into this world that did not make it right for him. You get what I'm saying?
I
And
get
that's
what
how
you're
the white
saying.
that's how the nationalists and white supremacists look at it. This world is not right for us because we now have this world where women are equal, minorities are equal, the borders are open, all this sort of stuff. So then they say we are forced to be violent, we're forced to be racist, we're forced to be like this. Go ahead.
Yes, I get what you're saying, but those were particularly the thoughts of the main character. And I don't think the director was trying to make the audience believe the main character. yeah, once again, I'm going to say like there is sympathy because some points we can sympathize, but as audiences, we kind of know that this white man is delusional, is, you know, racist, is homophobic, and stuff like that. And honestly, like his movies, I do think they are made for a certain crowd. Like not, you know, not every person in North Carolina is going to want to watch Gaspar Noah.
Yeah,
And
but if they did, they would say, trust me, if they did see Irreversible, if they did see I Stand Alone, they would say, well, I don't see the problem here other than him sleeping with his daughter. If it was his cousin, I'd be okay.
yeah, but once again, it's the same with every movie. Like if you're a person who thinks that way, then you can think about that if even if you watch Family Guy or something. So it doesn't necessarily put the director as someone who is like them.
I'm
So
gonna
you
say
think like Gaspar Noah does actually think like those people in North Carolina, and hence he made these movies.
I just have to question his intentions when in every movie he portrays a certain people a certain way. And yes, the people of North Carolina are not going to see his movies, but if they did, it would be hella dangerous because they would probably agree with like 90% of it. They're going to look at this movie and say, see, that's what they do. That's what the degenerates do. You brought up earlier that Climax was made with real dancers who just had the camera put on them. There was really no script for it. And the people were just told to do whatever. And that even the woman who was in the movie pretending to be a woman was actually a trans person and stuff like that. I think you're saying that, oh, Gaspar Noah is actually really left wing. He's really liberal. He's really open minded. But I think when you play these movies from beginning to end and look at how the people act within them, it's hard not to look at that sort of community, especially if you have no relation to them, if you don't know anybody like that, and say, oh, that's what they do. That's the sort of stuff that they're into. You might not think that, but I guarantee you a lot of people do. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but that's not on the director. Like you can't really control what audiences go into your films. And in his case, because his movies are so like, you know, controversial, I do think he can control them a little bit because most controversial movies are not really watched by left wings. But once again, like you can't really judge a director because of like who watches it and then how they react to it.
Let me ask you a real honest question, Aki. I
Because
want you to answer
sorry,
this.
but like, what is he supposed to do then? Like censor like his movies and stuff like that? Then we would never have movies like this.
No, I'm not asking him to censor, but I just have to ask the question: why are they constantly portrayed like this? I'm gonna ask you this because it sounds like I'm standing up for gay people too much, and people might think, "Oh, Simon got sugar in his tank." No, that's not the point. I want to ask you this, Aki. If in every Gaspar Noah movie, replace the gay people with black people in his movies, replace the boss in I Stand Alone with the black man, replace everything else in this movie with black people, would you not then say, "Why is Gaspar Noah constantly showing black people this way in Climax, in Irreversible, all like that?" Why would you not ask that question?
No, I don't
Okay,
think so. Because first of all, I want to say in climax once again, there's only like actually really one bad person, and all of the other people are very drugged out and poisoned by LSD. So I don't view them like in a bad light, and more like unfortunate people who were put in this situation. That's the first thing I want to say. In Irreversible, once again, I don't think like the rectum had anything to do with the moral of the story. And yes, there was this one guy who like, you know, he rapes a woman. We see him with a trans woman also, but then we see him like trying to be with a guy, trying to rape a guy. So I'm guessing he's like bi or something like that. And yes, but his sexuality is never really like brought up. And it's also to say like just like any other people, trans people, like gay people, black people, Muslims, every group has bad people and good people in them. So
but
I
why do
think
you
that's a little
constantly show
bit.
the bad people of this group?
It's
That's what
not
you.
constantly showing the
He
bad
is.
people.
What movie has we? What name one good gay character in any of his movies?
Just like I said, Climax doesn't show all people as bad people. There isn't really like a evil person in Climax. Rather, it's just like a lot of people on very heavy drugs.
Who then end
And
up doing bad things.
in Irreversible, we see a trans girl who, you know, the bad guy tried to be with, and he's like this trans sex worker, and we don't really see her in a bad light. Yes, she is a sex worker, but that's also like not something to be ashamed of.
Some people would say being a sex worker in itself is something to be
Oh,
ashamed of.
okay.
And actually, let's be honest. Let's absolutely be honest. If our main street where we live on in Budapest was full of working girls late at night, would you think that we were living on a safe street? Be honest. No,
No,
be honest.
no, no, I wouldn't.
You wouldn't, of course. So that goes to show that there is a stigma associated with sex work. We know when we turn on a movie and they show a street that's full of working girls, this is a bad area, right? So we're not going to sit here and try to pretend like sex work is just fully accepted. It's not,
Yes,
right?
yes. Okay, we're not, but I stated that just so like it's not necessarily something bad. Like she wasn't an evil person, but
Making
she
her
was
a
rather
sex
like just a sex worker.
making her a sex worker, a working girl who walks the streets at night, naturally is painting them in a bad light. Imagine if instead of it being a trans person, it was a Turkish girl out there with a miniskirt and neon stuff on her body trying to get Johns. You would say, okay, why are you showing Turkish people like this in this movie?
Okay, I wouldn't say that, but sure. Going back to my main point, in I Stand Alone, we don't necessarily feel any like negative ways about any of the immigrants that are shown or talked about in the movie. Like we see the Arab guy in the bar where the main character attacks, and he's like this innocent guy who's like reading a book or something. So I don't see how that in that movie also it makes the audience think like, oh, immigrants fuck everything up.
Okay.
I don't think that's what the audience thinks.
Okay, I agree with you on that. And if it sounds like I'm contradicting myself from earlier, I just want to clarify it. But if I am contradicting myself, this is exactly how I feel right now. And I'm making this clear. I Stand Alone is more of the manifesto of the mind of the racist white person, xenophobic, nationalistic white person who becomes that way because they can't get their job. They can't get their opportunities. The world is now changing and they're slowly dying off and nobody loves them, right? He is the forgotten man, the idea of the man who has been left behind because of time, right? And so this movie, I Stand Alone, makes us sympathetic to these ideas, right? And he says in the
No.
movie, we need strong Frenchmen to stand up and take back our country, the real white, blue, red Frenchmen. When we look at Irreversible, what is Marcus? Marcus is a very toxic, very masculine Frenchman coming to do battle against the evil gays who have taken over the city and are now even raping white women, right? And in Climax, what we see is a society where there are no men around who stand for the ideas that the French Republic is supposed to stand for or Western civilization is supposed to stand for. And what we have left are a bunch of degenerates who just want to dance party all day, do drugs, and eventually harm even themselves. Because when they're left by themselves, they cause nothing but trouble and mayhem for themselves. And this is Gasper Noah's love letter to France, the love letter that should wake them up out of their sleep to take back their country, right? If these movies, if Irreversible was about a black man that raped a white woman and he was hanging out at a super black bar and Marcus bursts in there trying to find Latenia or La Nigra, he's looking for La Nigra and he tries to find them and stuff like that. And all throughout the city, they're just being hella racist and trying to take these people down. If Climax was nothing but black dancers who end up, taking drugs and start hurting themselves. If I Stand Alone was about him coming to Paris and all the black folks have the jobs, the businesses, and he owes everybody money and he can't get a job because all the black guys say, no, you can't work there. You would feel like, okay, what is Gasper Noah trying to say throughout these movies? Do you get what I'm saying here?
Yes, but you are not getting what I'm saying because you're missing the main point. None of these ideas, none of these characters are also portrayed in a good light. They're just as bad as all of the trans people, all of the gay people in the movie. They're just as bad. If that's what you're saying, I'm trying to I don't think they are portrayed as bad, but you're saying they are. And all of those white men, all of those sexist, racist, fascist white men are just as bad as all of the other characters in the movies. And sometimes even the worst, like I Stand Alone. Like he's the worst man in the whole movie. So I don't get how you think that as a glorifying. And to me, what it does is mostly show ridiculousness of these sorts of ideas, homophobia, racism, misogyny, and all of those things, showing how real they are in the world, how they just how they destroy everything around them and things like that. And also focusing more on the bigger themes like morality here and I guess in Irreversible, I don't even know.
I, I,
Control, maybe. I don't know.
I just want to ask you, all right, just honest answers. In I Stand Alone, who is the main person that you hate?
The main character.
The main character.
Yes.
In Irreversible, who is the main person you hate? Latenia or Marcus?
Latenia.
In Climax, is there anybody that we actually care about more than the innocent child who got locked in the closet?
No, but if
No.
you were to ask me the same question, I would say the girl who put the drugs.
Well,
In the end, they
you
reveal
hate her,
it.
right?
Yeah.
Right. Well, you hate her because of what she did,
Yeah.
right? But still, I think that movie is anti-drug too. Irreversible is anti-gay, Climax is anti-drug, and I Stand Alone is anti this new wave of society, this evolving society that is, full of people who are powerful and taking over and pushing the white Frenchmen to the margins. So that's how I view these. That's how I view these films. When we look at who we root for and who we go against, we really dislike Latenia because he's this evil gay monster controlling the streets, right? We really don't care about any of the people in Climax because we view them as people who are living an alternative lifestyle, living in a way that most people would not say is conformist, and they are doing things when they're alone that are drugs, sex, rock and roll, and that leads to their destruction and the innocent loss of life of a child. And I Stand Alone. Instead, what we have here is a white Frenchman who just can't get his way. So I mean, we can agree to disagree, but I think it's just about the perception. You're saying the movies don't glorify them, the movies don't celebrate them, but I'm thinking that people could look at them and see something else because it's so easy. I'm saying Gaspar Noé makes it too easy to see that. He makes it too easy to see fascist messaging in his movies.
Yeah, but he's not really responsible for that, and that doesn't necessarily show his thoughts. Just because some people might see his movies and think, the other way. So it doesn't necessarily show his stand or his thoughts. And I think, except from Climax, I think you are making the main character's thoughts and personalities equal to what the movie is trying to say. And I think they're completely different things. In I Stand Alone, what the white guy is thinking and saying all the time is not the moral of the story. And I think that's why, I'm not going to agree with that. And we can agree to disagree, yes, because I just don't see it that way.
All right. Well, I thought this was a good chat. What did you think?
Yeah, definitely.
So, final thoughts on the movie. I'm gonna say that this movie is definitely entertaining, right? It does kind of keep you on edge, keep you on your seat. You want to see what happens next. Some big moral questions and stuff like that. But because of my reservations about the messaging of this movie and the fact that it's just Joker, but with a baguette, with an accordion, with the
It's not
Ejectawe.
Joker.
It's Joker with a lisp, and So I'll just give this movie a 5, honestly, because I think the messaging is absolutely horrible. It's horrible, but it is an entertaining movie, and Gasper Noé is great at making even the most disgusting things thrilling and compelling. He's not shocking you just for shock's sake. He's not just trying to gross you out just to make you throw up. He's making you think while also putting some big ideas in front of you. But the idea he's getting across here, I feel like, is the absolute worst. So 5.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 6 because I do generally enjoy like his movies, and it's not the best movie that we've seen of him. I think my favorite one was the Irreversible, and then Climax, and then this one. But it's
Same.
definitely like worth seeing if you're interested in like his style. And I would also suggest like watching this one first, and then watching Irreversible for later, since they're sequel. And also, when you see Irreversible, you don't really get affected by any other like gore scenes anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would say like if you watch this after Irreversible, it could be a bit more underwhelming. But if you go with the this discography, it would be better.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that order too, by the way. And a 6 out of 10. I really thought you were going to go higher. I thought you were going to go higher because it seemed like you were, really enjoying it.
I really enjoy like his cinematography overall, and I was kind of standing up for him in a way. But yeah, this movie for me, it's a 6. Like it was enjoyable. It was above average. But yeah, it's also I don't know. It was an interesting movie. I don't
Yeah,
know.
you said you fell asleep though during certain parts.
Yeah, I was. I'm a bit tired. That's why though,
I see.
and I was laying down.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for watching this. Check out more episodes of Cinema Crossroads coming soon on Spotify. This same podcast is played on my YouTube channel, Simon Hill Keeps It Trail, so sub there. And also check out Backpack Bandits for our travel content. Any movie suggestions, send them in the comments. Find us on Twitter, find us on YouTube, and let us know what we should review next. Great suggestions always get great reviews, and peace.